I stood in the driveway of the home I built 30 years ago, holding a single suitcase. My daughter Emily died from cancer 3 weeks prior. Her husband Derek just told me to leave, claiming the house now belongs to him and that I no longer have any place there. My hands shook as I loaded my bag into my old truck. I didn't argue or fight back. I simply nodded, got in my vehicle, and drove away, watching the house disappear in my rearview mirror, knowing something Derek doesn't. My name is Jeffrey Morrison, and I'm 67 years old. That house Derek just kicked me out of? I built it with my own 2 hands back in 1995. Every beam, every nail, every square foot of that 3-acre plot in rural Pennsylvania, just outside Millbrook, was a labor of love. Shed followed in her mother's footsteps, always wanting to help people, to care for those who were suffering. When Margaret died, Emily and I clung to each other. She was all I had left, and I was all she had. She started coming over every Sunday for dinner. We'd sit at that oak table, share a meal, talk about our weeks. It became our ritual, our way of honoring Margaret's memory. 2 years ago, Emily brought Derek home for the first time. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative, drove a leased BMW that gleamed like a mirror, wore suits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage used to. I tried to like him. Really, I did, but there was something off from the start. He barely looked me in the eye when we shook hands. Kept checking his phone during dinner. Made comments about the house being an old farmhouse. Said things like, "Bet this place needs a ton of work, and property values out here must be pretty low." Emily seemed happy, though. Her eyes lit up when she talked about him. She laughed at his jokes. So I kept my mouth shut. What was I going to do? Tell my daughter her boyfriend gave me a bad feeling? She was an adult. She could make her own choices. They got married 8 months later. Quick engagement. Small wedding at the Methodist church in town. Derek moved into Emily's apartment in the city, and their visits to the house became less frequent. Once a month, maybe, then every other month. Emily always seemed tired when they did come. Thinner. I'd ask if everything was okay, and she'd smile and say work was just stressful. 6 months ago, everything changed. Emily called me on a Tuesday morning. I was in the garage, working on a bookshelf for Mrs. Patterson down the road. Emily's voice was shaking. 3 days after Emily moved back home, Derek showed up with a moving truck. Said he was moving in too, needed to keep an eye on things. I felt uneasy but welcomed him for Emily's sake. What else could I do? My daughter was dying. If having her husband there brought her comfort, then I'd deal with my discomfort. But Derek didn't act like a man whose wife was dying. He complained constantly. The old appliances weren't good enough. The floors creaked too much. The house didn't have central air conditioning. He made comments about how much the property would be worth if it were fixed up and sold. That word, sold, always made my stomach turn. He spent most of his time in the guest room on his laptop, barely sitting with Emily. I was the one who held her hand, read to her, made her soup, helped her to the bathroom when she was too weak to walk alone. Derek would pop his head in once or twice a day, ask how she was feeling, then disappear again. One evening, about 4 months ago, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. Emily was sleeping. I heard Derek's voice in the backyard, talking on his phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but his voice carried through the open window. He was laughing, actually laughing. He said, "Just a few more months of playing the devoted husband. Then I'm set. This property's worth at least $400,000. She doesn't know I've been seeing someone else for over a year." I froze. The plate I was holding slipped from my hands and shattered in the sink. My vision blurred with rage. I wanted to march outside and throw him off my property right then. But I couldn't. Emily was inside, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. If I confronted Derek, there'd be a scene. Emily would find out her husband was cheating on her, that he was just waiting for her to die so he could cash in. She didn't deserve that. Not in her final days. So I stood there in my kitchen, hands gripping the edge of the sink, and made a choice. It let Derek think he was winning. It let him believe the house would be his. And when the time came, when Emily was at peace and no longer had to suffer through the truth about who she'd married, I'd deal with Derek my own way. That conversation I overheard changed everything. I realized Derek wasn't just a bad husband. He was a predator, and he thought I was just a foolish old man who'd hand over everything, without a fight. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Over the next few months, Derek's behavior got worse. He started treating me like hired help in my own home. He'd call out from the living room, "Jeffrey, get me a beer from the fridge." Or, "Jeffrey, take out the trash. It's starting to smell." Or, "Jeffrey, keep it down. I'm on an important call." I endured it for Emily. Every time Derek barked an order, I'd think of my daughter sleeping in the next room, fighting for every breath, and I'd do whatever he asked without complaint. But inside, I was keeping a tally. Every insult, every dismissive comment, every moment he ignored his dying wife to scroll through his phone. I remembered all of it. Derek started inviting friends over without asking. Loud gatherings while Emily slept, people I'd never met drinking beer on my porch, laughing and carrying on like this was some kind of vacation house. I'd ask them to keep it down, and Derek would wave me off. "Relax, old man. We're just having a good time." Emily's condition deteriorated rapidly. What could I say? That I knew he was a fraud? That I'd heard him on the phone planning his life after Emily died? Patricia seemed to understand without me saying a word. One afternoon in late September, Emily asked to speak with me alone. Patricia had just given her pain medication, and Emily was lucid but weak. I pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand. "Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know Derek isn't who I thought he was." My heart broke. "Em, you don't need to worry about any of that right now. I've heard things," she continued. "Seen things. Phone calls he doesn't know I can hear. The way he looks at me now, like I'm already gone. I made a terrible mistake marrying him." Tears rolled down her cheeks. I wiped them away gently. "You rest now," I said. "Don't worry about anything. I'm here. I'll always be here. Promise me you'll be okay after I'm gone." His office was downtown, above the hardware store, up a narrow flight of stairs that creaked under my weight. Walter greeted me with a concerned expression. Had heard about Emily, sent flowers to the house. We sat in his office, surrounded by law books and framed diplomas, and I told him everything. About Derek, about what I'd overheard, about how Derek was treating me in my own home. Walter listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked, "Jeffrey, whose name is on the deed to your house?" "Mine," I said. "It's always been in my name. Margaret and I bought the land together back in '95, but after she died, the deed's just in my name." "Has Emily ever been on the deed? Did you ever transfer ownership, or add her name?" "No, never. Why would I? It's my house. I always planned to leave it to Emily in my will, but I never got around to updating the paperwork after Margaret died." Walter nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "That's very important, Jeffrey. Under Pennsylvania law, if Emily passes away, Derek has no automatic claim to your property. He might assume he inherits everything as her spouse, but he'd only inherit what was legally hers." The implications hit me immediately. What if Derek thinks the house is Emily's? Then he's in for a surprise, Walter said. "But Jeffrey, you need to be prepared. If he tries to claim ownership or force you out, he'll be wrong, but it could get ugly. Men like that don't let go easily." I sat there for a long moment, thinking. Then I made my decision. "Walter, I need you to draft a new will for me. Crystal clear, everything spelled out. And I need documentation proving my sole ownership of the property. Every record, every tax statement, everything." Walter picked up a pen. "I'll have everything ready within the week. And Jeffrey, I'm sorry about Emily. She's a good person. She deserved so much better than this." "Yes," I said quietly. "She did." I left the office feeling a strange mix of grief and determination. Emily was dying, and there was nothing I could do to stop that. But I could make sure Derek didn't profit from her death. I could make sure justice was served. Emily died 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. It was peaceful, quiet. Patricia was there, standing respectfully at the foot of the bed. Derek was upstairs in the guest room on a video call. I could hear his voice through the ceiling, talking about quarterly sales projections. Emily's hand went still in mine. Her chest stopped rising. Patricia checked her pulse, then looked at me with sad eyes and nodded. My daughter was gone. I sat there holding her hand for another 10 minutes, not wanting to let go, not ready to accept that she was really gone. Finally, Patricia put a gentle hand on my shoulder. Jeffrey, I'll call the funeral home. No, I said. Let me tell Derek first. I walked upstairs slowly, each step feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I knocked on the guest room door. Derek opened it, annoyed at the interruption. Emily's gone, I said simply. Derek's expression barely changed. Oh, okay. I'll call the funeral home. That was it. No tears, no emotion, just a flat acknowledgement and a task to complete. He closed the door in my face and picked up his phone. I stood there in the hallway, numb with grief and rage, knowing that the man on the other side of that door felt nothing at all. The funeral was small, held at the Methodist church where Emily and Derek had gotten married just 2 years earlier. About 40 people attended. Emily's colleagues from the hospital, neighbors, friends from her childhood. Derek gave a brief eulogy that sounded like Head pulled it from the internet. Generic platitudes about Emily being a kind person and a loving wife. Every word was hollow. I couldn't speak at the funeral. My grief was too raw, too overwhelming. I sat in the front pew and stared at the casket, thinking about all the moments I'd never have with my daughter. No more Sunday dinners. No more phone calls. No more chances to tell her I loved her. After the service, we gathered at the house. People brought casseroles and pies, shook my hand, offered condolences. Derek played the part of the grieving widower, accepting sympathy with a somber expression. I watched him work the room and felt sick. By evening, everyone had left. Just Derek and me in the house that had been filled with so much life and was now filled with nothing but silence and grief. That's when Derek's mask finally came off completely. The evening of Emily's funeral, Derek sat at my kitchen table like he owned the place. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, barely holding myself together. I'd just buried my daughter. All I wanted was to be alone with my grief. Derek poured himself a glass of whiskey from a bottle Head brought. Didn't offer me any. Just sat there, relaxed, like we were about to discuss something as mundane as the weather. We need to talk about arrangements, he said. I sat down across from him, every muscle in my body tense. Arrangements. Yeah, about this property. I've been looking into things. This house is now mine through Emily. I'm her legal spouse. I inherit her estate. I kept my voice steady. This house was never Emily's. It's mine. Derek laughed. Actually laughed. A cold, cruel sound that echoed in the quiet kitchen. Emily lived here her whole life. Jeffrey, you're an old man living in what's now my house. I've already spoken to a real estate agent. This place could sell for $450,000. Maybe more if we put some work into it. New appliances. Fresh paint. Update the bathrooms. My chest tightened. You need to leave. This is my home. Derek's expression turned ugly. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. You don't get it, old man. I've looked at county records. Sure, Emily's name might not be on the deed, but you're just a senior citizen living alone. I can make this very difficult for you. I can claim I've been supporting you, that you're not capable of living independently. I can drag this through probate court for years. Make your life absolute hell. I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage, from the effort it took not to reach across that table and grab him by his expensive collar. Derek, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm asking you nicely. Pack your things and go. He stood too, stepping closer, trying to intimidate me with his height, his youth. How about this? You pack your things and go. I'm done playing nice. Emily's gone. I don't need to pretend anymore. You've got until tomorrow morning to clear out. After that, I'm changing the locks. That he had no legal right to anything. That the house was mine and always had been. But something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was strategy. I wanted to see just how far Derek would take this. I wanted to watch him dig his own grave. All right, I said simply. Derek seemed surprised by my easy compliance. A smug smile spread across his face. Smart choice. Oh, and leave the truck keys. That truck's been parked here for years. Technically, It's part of the estate, too. I said nothing. Just turned and walked upstairs to what used to be the guest room. The room where Derek had spent Emily's final months making business calls and ignoring his dying wife. That night, I packed a single suitcase, clothes, toiletries, a few photographs. I walked through the house one last time, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors I'd installed myself. I touched the oak table in the kitchen, ran my hand along the countertop, stood in Emily's room, now empty except for the hospital bed. Looked out at the backyard where Margaret's roses had bloomed for so many years. The yellow shutters Margaret had painted glowed in the moonlight. This house held every important memory of my life, and Derek thought he could just take it. The next morning, I came downstairs with my suitcase. Derek was in the kitchen, drinking coffee like he was lord of the manor. Had made himself at home quickly. Already had his laptop set up on my table, papers spread out. As I headed for the door, Derek called out, "Hey, Jeffrey. One more thing." I turned slowly. He was grinning. Actually grinning at me like this was all some kind of game head won. "I'm having someone move in next week. Amanda, you never met her, but she's been in my life a lot longer than Emily was. We're going to enjoy this place. Maybe, well, finally put in that pool I always wanted out back. Right where those ugly rose bushes are. Thanks for building such a solid house, old man. Really, thanks for all your hard work." Every fiber of my being wanted to explode, to tell Derek exactly how wrong he was, to explain in great detail that he was a trespasser in my home and that his little fantasy was about to come crashing down around him, but I remained silent. I walked out the door and down the porch steps, loaded my suitcase into my truck. Derek stood on the porch, watching with satisfaction, arms crossed like some kind of conqueror, surveying his new territory. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine. The truck rumbled to life, familiar and reliable. As I reached the end of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Derek was already on his phone, laughing about something, probably telling Amanda the good news, that the old man was gone and the house was theirs. I whispered to myself, "Enjoy it while you can, Derek. Enjoy it while you can." Then I drove away from the home I'd built with my own hands, the home where I'd raised my daughter and buried my wife's ashes in the rose garden. I drove away knowing something Derek didn't know. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I drove straight to the Pine Grove Motor Inn on the edge of Millbrook. It was a rundown place, paint peeling on the exterior, neon sign flickering, $12 a night, weekly rates available. The kind of place where you didn't ask questions and nobody asked you any. The room was small and dingy, faded floral wallpaper, a bed with a sagging mattress, a television that probably hadn't worked since 2005. But it was clean enough. I set my suitcase on the bed and sat down beside it, and for the first time since Emily died, I let myself really cry. Not the quiet tears I'd shed at the funeral. Real, gut-wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. I cried for Emily, for Margaret, for the house I'd just been forced out of. I cried for all the years of work and love that Derek thought he could just steal. When the tears finally stopped, I felt hollowed out but also strangely clear. Grief has a way of stripping everything down to what really matters. And what mattered was justice. For Emily, for Margaret, for myself. The next morning, I called Walter Hayes. He answered on the second ring. "Jeffrey, I heard what happened. Half the town's talking about it. That son of a..." "Walter," I interrupted. "When's the will reading?" There was a pause. "Emily's will reading is scheduled for 2 weeks from today, Thursday at 10 in the morning. Derek's lawyer requested it. They're expecting to formalize his inheritance of her estate. I'll be there," I said. "And Walter, I want you to bring every document we prepared. Deed, title, property tax records, everything." I could hear the smile in Walter's voice. "It'll be my pleasure, Jeffrey. My absolute pleasure." Over the next 2 weeks, I stayed at the Pine Grove Motor Inn. I couldn't afford to just sit around feeling sorry for myself, so I took odd carpentry jobs around town. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's front steps that had been rotting for months, built new shelves for the public library, repaired the fence behind the hardware store. Word spread fast in a small town. Everyone knew what Derek had done. The reactions ranged from outrage to disbelief. Mrs. Chen, at the grocery store, wouldn't let me pay for coffee. Just poured me a cup every morning and waved away my money. That Derek is a terrible man, she'd say in her accented English. You good man, Jeffrey. Emily was good girl. So sorry. Tom Burke, who owned the Main Street diner, refused to let me pay for meals. Your money's no good here, he'd say, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. Not until you get your house back. The kindness of my neighbors and friends kept me going. It reminded me that I wasn't alone. That community meant something, that the values I'd tried to live by, honesty and integrity and treating people with respect, actually mattered. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine what Derek was doing to my house. Mrs. Patterson lived 2 properties over and could see the place from her kitchen window. She'd call me with updates that made my blood boil. Derek had ripped out all of Margaret's rose bushes. Every single one, thrown them in a burn pile and set them on fire. Had hauled my oak table to the dump. The table I'd spent 3 months building. Just tossed it out like garbage. Had brought in new furniture. Modern stuff. All sharp angles and no character. Had painted over the yellow shutters. Painted them gray. Margaret's sunshine yellow, gone. Amanda had moved in. They were having parties every weekend. Cars lined up on the driveway. Music blasting until 2 in the morning. Neighbors complained, but there was nothing they could do. One afternoon, I couldn't help myself. I drove past the house. Didn't stop, didn't pull in. Just slowed down as I passed. There were 3 cars in the driveway I didn't recognize. The front door was wide open. I could hear music and laughter from inside. I felt a deep ache in my chest, but also a strange calm. Derek was living his fantasy, throwing his parties, playing house with his girlfriend, acting like he'd won some great prize. But his time was running out. He just didn't know it yet. 3 days before the will reading, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, is this Jeffrey? A woman's voice. Young, uncertain. Yes. You don't know me, but my name is Amanda. I'm living in your house with Derek. I gripped the phone tighter but said nothing. She continued, speaking quickly like she was afraid she'd lose her nerve. I need to tell you something. I didn't know Emily had just died when I moved in. Derek told me she'd been gone for over a year. He said you were just a tenant who'd refused to leave. That had finally gotten rid of you. I listened, still silent. I found some papers today, Amanda said, her voice shaking. Medical bills, hospice records. Emily died 3 weeks ago, didn't she? Derek lied to me about everything, and I heard him on the phone with his lawyer yesterday. He was laughing about how He'd gotten rid of the old man, about how once the will reading was done, He'd sell the place and Wed move to Florida with the money. She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. I'm not a bad person, she said. I didn't know. I didn't know any of this. I'm leaving. I'm packing my stuff right now while he's out. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your daughter must have been a wonderful person to have a father like you. Before I could respond, she hung up. I sat there in my motel room, staring at the phone. Even Amanda, Derek's own girlfriend, couldn't stomach what He'd done. She'd been lied to as well, used as another pawn in Derek's scheme. The will reading was in 3 days, 72 hours. I counted down every minute. Thursday morning arrived cold and clear. October in Pennsylvania. Leaves turning gold and red. That crisp autumn air that makes everything feel sharp and vivid. I put on my best shirt and jacket, the same ones I'd worn to Emily's funeral. Drove into downtown Millbrook and parked in front of Walter's office. I arrived 15 minutes early, climbed those creaky stairs above the hardware store. Walter was waiting for me, dressed in his lawyer's best, a stack of manila folders on his desk. You ready for this? He asked. More than ready, I said. Walter smiled. Jeffrey, I hope you don't mind, but I invited someone else. I thought you might need a witness. Before I could ask what he meant, there was a knock at the door. Patricia, the hospice nurse, walked in. She was wearing a simple blue dress and carrying her own folder of documents. "Patricia," I said, surprised. She smiled gently. "Walter called me. He said, you might need someone to testify about Derek's behavior during Emily's final days. I'm happy to do it. What that man did to you, to Emily, it's not right. Someone needs to speak up." I felt a wave of gratitude so strong I almost couldn't speak. "Thank you. Thank you both." At exactly 10 o'clock, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, confident footsteps. The door opened, and Derek walked in. He was dressed in an expensive charcoal suit, gold watch gleaming on his wrist, hair slicked back. He looked like a man. Ho'd already won. Walter read from the document. Emily Morrison's estate consists of the following: one savings account with Millbrook Community Bank, current balance $12,300, one vehicle, a 2018 Honda Civic, currently valued at approximately $15,000, personal belongings and effects, her share of marital assets acquired during the marriage, which includes joint furniture and household items purchased with her husband Derek Morrison. Derek nodded, looking bored, like this was all just paperwork keeping him from his real prize. Walter continued. Emily's will states that her savings account and vehicle are to be left to her father, Jeffrey Morrison. Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. Fine. What about the house? Walter looked up from the document, looked Derek straight in the eye. The house is not part of Emily's estate. The room went very still. Derek sat forward. What do you mean it's not part of her estate? She lived there her entire life. Walter's voice remained calm, professional. The property located at 1847 Meadowbrook Lane is solely owned by Jeffrey Morrison. It has never been in Emily's name. The deed, title, and all property records show Jeffrey as the sole owner. Therefore, it cannot be inherited by you or anyone else through Emily's will. I watched Derek's face carefully. Confusion first, then disbelief, then anger rising like a tide. He turned to his lawyer. Helen Pritchard was already flipping through papers, her expression growing more concerned by the second. "We need to see documentation," she said, her professional tone starting to crack. Walter slid a thick folder across the table. "Everything you need is right here. The original deed from 1995, property tax statements going back 30 years, all in Jeffrey's name, title records, mortgage documents showing the loan was paid off in 2010. All of it proves sole ownership by Jeffrey Morrison." Derek grabbed the papers, scanning them frantically. His face went from tan to pale in seconds. The smug confidence drained away, replaced by something he'd been waiting weeks to see. Fear. He looked at me with pure hatred. "This is garbage. Emily lived there. I have rights as her widower. There are common law claims. I supported that household." Walter remained perfectly calm. "Mr. Morrison, there are no common law claims in Pennsylvania that would grant you ownership of property that never belonged to your spouse. You lived there for approximately 6 months while Emily was receiving end-of-life care. That doesn't establish ownership, tenancy rights, or any legal claim whatsoever." Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He pointed at me. You knew all along, and you let me think Id inherited it. You played me." I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. My voice was steady, clear. "No, Derek, you played yourself. You assumed. You never asked who owned the house. You just decided it was yours and threw me out of my own home." Derek's hands were shaking. "I'm not done with this. It'll take you to court. It'll claim elder abuse, financial manipulation, undue influence. It'll drag you through so much legal hell you'll wish you'd just given me the house." Helen Pritchard put a hand on Derek's arm. "Derek, sit down. You have no case." But Derek was beyond listening, beyond reason. He turned on her. "You're my lawyer. Do your job. Find a way to make this work." Helen stood up, gathering her papers. "Derek, I can't represent you in a case that has no legal merit. You have no claim to that property. Zero. And frankly, I'm not comfortable with what I'm hearing about your behavior." She looked at me. "Mr. Morrison, I apologize. If I'd known the full circumstances, I would never have taken this meeting." Then she walked out. Just like that. Derek's own lawyer. Abandoned him. Derek stood alone, shaking with rage. He pointed at me again. You're a bitter old man who couldn't stand to see someone else happy. Emily would be ashamed of you. That was the breaking point. Patricia stood up. Her voice was firm, controlled, but full of righteous anger. How dare you? Jeffrey cared for your wife every single day while you ignored her. I was there. I saw everything. I documented everything in my hospice reports. Derek turned on her. You're just a nurse. Nobody cares what you think. Patricia didn't flinch. She opened her folder and pulled out papers. These are my official hospice care records, including detailed notes from the day I heard you on the phone in the backyard. You were talking to someone, laughing, saying you couldn't wait for Emily to die so you could sell the house and move on with your life. I wrote down every word, dated and signed. The room went completely silent. Derek's face drained of all remaining color. Walter stood up. This meeting is concluded. Mr. Morrison, you have 48 hours to vacate Jeffrey's property. After that, we'll pursue trespassing charges, a restraining order, and possible legal action for any damage you've caused to the home. Do you understand? Derek stood there, speechless. The reality finally crashing down on him. Head lost, completely and utterly lost. He looked at me one last time. I met his gaze without blinking, without anger, without satisfaction, just calm certainty. Derek turned and walked out of the office. We could hear his footsteps pounding down the stairs, angry and defeated. I sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. Walter put a hand on my shoulder. You handled that with remarkable grace, Jeffrey. Patricia came around the table and hugged me. Emily would be so proud of you. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite happiness, but something close. Relief. Justice. The knowledge that truth and integrity still mattered. Derek left Walter's office in a fury. I could hear him outside, shouting into his phone, his voice carrying up through the window. I sat there for another few minutes, letting the reality sink in. The house was mine. Had always been mine. Derek had no claim, no rights, no leverage. Walter organized the documents back into folders. Jeffrey, I'd suggest you head over to the house today. The sooner you reclaim your property, the better. I nodded. What about the 48 hours you mentioned? That was generous, Walter said with a slight smile. Legally, he's trespassing right now. You could have the sheriff remove him immediately, but I figured giving him time to leave on his own might avoid more drama. I thanked Walter and Patricia, then drove back to the Pine Grove Motor Inn. Packed my single suitcase one more time. Checked out. The clerk, a young man named Jason, said, Heard what happened at the lawyer's office. Whole town's talking about it. Good for you, Mr. Morrison. Really, good for you. News traveled fast in Millbrook. I appreciated that. Appreciated knowing that people cared, that justice being served mattered to more than just me. I drove to my house. My home. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Derek's BMW parked haphazardly near the garage. The front door was standing open. I could hear crashing sounds from inside. I walked up the porch steps slowly, my heart pounding. Not from fear, but from anger at what I knew I was about to find. The inside of the house was destroyed. Derek had trashed it in his rage. Furniture overturned, cushions slashed. Picture frames smashed, photos scattered across the floor. Holes punched in the drywall. The television screen cracked, kitchen cabinets hanging open, dishes swept onto the floor. I walked through each room, documenting the damage with my eyes. It was extensive, but not irreparable. I was a carpenter. I'd built this house from the ground up. I could fix it. I heard footsteps above me. Derek appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked terrible, disheveled, unshaven, eyes red. He was drunk. I could smell the whiskey from 15 feet away. Come to gloat, he slurred. Come to reclaim my home, I said calmly. You have until tomorrow morning to leave. Derek stumbled down the stairs, catching himself on the railing. You know what's funny? I actually loved Emily once. In the beginning, she was so pretty, so sweet, but then she got boring, always talking about family and this stupid house. She never wanted anything more than this. He gestured around at the destruction had caused. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Every instinct screamed at me to throw him out right then, physically if necessary, but I kept my voice level. Emily was worth 100 of you, Derek, and she knew exactly what you were before she died, she told me. Derek's eyes widened. He stumbled, nearly fell. She knew. I nodded. She knew. About Amanda. About your plans. About all of it, and she forgave you anyway, because that's the kind of person she was. But I don't forgive you, and I want you out of my house. Now. Derek seemed to deflate. The anger drained out of him, replaced by pathetic self-pity. I have nowhere to go. Amanda left me when she found out the truth. My job fired me for taking too much time off. I've got nothing. I felt absolutely no sympathy. You did this to yourself. Every choice you made led you here. Now get out. Derek looked around at the destruction Head caused, seemed to realize how far Head fallen. Without another word, he went upstairs. I heard him moving around, throwing things into bags. 20 minutes later, he came back down carrying 3 garbage bags full of clothes and belongings. He walked past me without looking at me, loaded everything into his BMW, and drove away. I stood on the porch, watching his taillights disappear down the driveway, the same porch where Id watched Emily learn to ride her bike, where Margaret and I had sat in rocking chairs on summer evenings, where Derek had stood so smugly just weeks ago, thinking Head won. The night air was cool. I could hear crickets, the distant sound of wind through the trees. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Really, truly, at peace. The next morning, I started cleaning and repairing. I was in the kitchen, sweeping up broken dishes, when I heard a knock at the door. It was Tom Burke from the diner. Heard you might need some help fixing things up, he said, carrying a toolbox and a bag of pastries. Within an hour, more people showed up. Mrs. Patterson, with paint and brushes. Jason from the motel with tools Head borrowed from his dad. Mrs. Chen with cleaning supplies and sandwiches. Even some of Emily's former colleagues from the hospital arrived, wanting to help. We worked all day, patching walls, fixing cabinets, cleaning every surface. People I'd known for years, and some I barely knew. All coming together to help restore my home. By sunset, the house looked almost like itself again. Not perfect, but close. The holes were patched. The floors were clean. The broken furniture had been hauled away, replaced with pieces people donated from their own homes. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by neighbors and friends, and realized something profound. This was what Derek had never understood. This sense of community, of people caring for each other not because they had to, but because they wanted to. This was what Emily had learned from Margaret and me. This was what made a house a home. 3 days later, I received a certified letter. It was from Derek's bank. Head defaulted on his car payments, credit cards, personal loans. Had been living far beyond his means for years, spending money he didn't have, running up debt he couldn't pay. The BMW was repossessed a week later. I heard through town gossip that Derek had moved 2 states away. No forwarding address? No goodbye? Just gone, leaving behind nothing but bad memories and unpaid bills. I felt no triumph in his downfall, just relief that he was gone, and I could finally begin to heal. 1 week after the will reading, Walter Hayes stopped by the house. He was carrying a bottle of wine and a manila folder. "I have something for you, Jeffrey," he said. We sat at my newly rebuilt kitchen table. The oak one Id made was gone, destroyed by Derek, but Tom Burke had built me a new pine table. It wasn't the same, but it was beautiful in its own way. Walter opened the folder. Inside was a leather-bound journal. I recognized it immediately, Emily's handwriting on the cover. "She gave this to me 2 weeks before she died," Walter said gently. "Asked me to give it to you after everything was settled. After Derek was dealt with, she wanted you to have it when you were ready." My hands shook as I took the journal. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew I'd have to deal with him." Walter nodded. "She knew. And she trusted you to handle it the right way." After Walter left, I sat in my favorite chair, the one that faced the window overlooking the backyard. I opened Emily's journal and began to read. I spent the next 2 months reading Emily's journal slowly, savoring every word. Shed started writing it the week after her diagnosis, filling page after page with her thoughts, fears, memories, and hopes. Some entries were heartbreaking. She wrote about the pain, the nausea, the exhaustion that came with the cancer eating away at her body. She wrote about watching her own decline, knowing she was dying but not ready to let go. But other entries were beautiful. She wrote about her childhood, about memories it almost forgotten. The time I taught her to hammer a nail straight. The summer Margaret showed her how to make strawberry jam. Christmas mornings opening presents under the tree I'd cut down myself. Her first day of school. Her first heartbreak. Her graduation. She wrote about Derek too. About how Shed loved him at first. Believed he was her future. But then she started noticing things. How he never really listened when she talked. How he always seemed to be looking past her, towards something else. How when she got sick, he withdrew, instead of moving closer. One entry, written a month before she died, said, "I made a mistake with Derek. I see that now. I thought I needed someone exciting, someone who could give me a different life than the one I grew up with. But I was wrong. The life I had, the home Dad built, the love Mom showed me, that was everything. That was real. Derek is a shadow of a person, empty inside. I'm grateful I figured it out before the end. I'm grateful I got to come home." Another entry, from 2 weeks before she died. "Dad has been my rock through everything. I'm so sorry I brought Derek into his life. I see how Derek treats him, and it makes me furious. But I'm too weak to fight, too tired, so I'm trusting Dad to handle it. As the strongest man I've ever known, he'll know what to do." She wrote about our relationship, about how much she loved me. If I could do it all again, I'd spend less time chasing what I thought was love and more time appreciating what was already there. Real love isn't flashy or exciting. It's quiet and steady. It's Dad making me soup when I'm sick. It's Mom singing while she gardens. It's home. It's always been home. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. But they were good tears. Healing tears. Emily had understood. In the end, Shed understood what really mattered. The house was fully repaired now. I'd worked on it little by little, replacing what Derek had destroyed, restoring what had been damaged. I'd even replanted Margaret's rose bushes, found the same variety at a nursery 2 towns over, spent a whole weekend getting them into the ground along the fence line. I repainted the shutters yellow, Margaret's sunshine yellow, stood on the ladder with a brush in my hand, remembering the way Shed looked, painting them the first time, singing some old folk song, paint in her hair. I built a new oak table for the kitchen, not a replacement for the one Derek destroyed, but a new one. Different design, but just as solid, just as full of intention and care. The house felt alive again. Not the same as it had been, but alive in a new way. Healing. Like I was healing. Patricia became a regular visitor. Shed stopped by on weekends, bring casseroles and conversation. We'd sit on the porch, drink coffee, talk about Emily and Margaret, and life. She told me about her own losses, her own struggles. We found comfort in each other's company. Not romantic, just the comfort of 2 people who'd seen hard things and survived them. One Saturday, she said, "Jeffrey, some of us from church have a community dinner group. We meet every Thursday. Potluck style. Everyone brings something. I was wondering if you'd like to join us." I smiled. I'd like that very much. Thursday dinners became part of my new routine. 8 or 10 people gathered at different houses, sharing meals and stories. I met people I'd lived near for years, but never really known. Formed friendships that felt genuine and warm. Life settled into a new rhythm. I took on carpentry projects around town, built a new front porch for the library, made custom cabinets for the church kitchen, repaired the playground equipment at the elementary school. Every Sunday, I visited Emily's grave at the Methodist Church Cemetery, brought fresh flowers, sat on the bench nearby, talked to her like she was still there, told her about my week, about the people I'd met, about how the house was doing. One Sunday, a young couple approached me. The man said, "Excuse me, are you Jeffrey Morrison?" I nodded. The woman smiled. "We're looking for someone to build us a custom home." Tom Burke at the diner said you're the best carpenter in 3 counties. Would you be interested in taking on a project? I looked at them. Young and hopeful, just starting their lives together. Just like Margaret and I had been decades ago. Tell me about your dream home, I said. We talked for over an hour. They wanted something simple but solid. 3 bedrooms, wraparound porch, big kitchen for family dinners. They had 3 acres of land just outside town. Wanted to raise kids there, build a life. I agreed to take the project. As I drove home that evening, I realized something profound. Derek had tried to take everything from me. My home, my dignity, my peace. But had failed because the things that mattered most couldn't be taken. Memories, integrity, community, love. Those belonged to me forever. 3 months after the will reading, on what would have been Emily's 35th birthday, I hosted a small gathering at the house. Patricia was there, Walter and his wife, Tom Burke, Mrs. Patterson, and a dozen others. We ate dinner at the new pine table, shared stories about Emily, laughed and cried together. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I stood on the porch watching them go. The same porch where Derek had stood smugly, thinking he'd won. The yellow shutters glowed in the sunset. Margaret's roses were blooming, pink and white and red, beautiful and resilient. I thought about the journey he'd been on. Loss, betrayal, grief, anger, but also resilience, justice, healing, community. Id learned something through all of it. Something that had been there all along but that Id needed to rediscover. Home isn't just a building. It's not property or equity or something that can be bought and sold. Home is the people who fill it with love. It's the memories embedded in every board and nail. It's the community that rallies around you when you fall. It's the values you build your life on and pass down to the next generation. Derek had seen the house as an asset, as something to possess and profit from. Had never understood what it really was. Had never understood what Emily and Margaret had known in their bones. That the truest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships and integrity and the love we give and receive. I walked back inside and picked up Emily's journal one more time. Read the final entry she'd written 2 days before she died. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Please don't be sad for too long. Live fully. Love openly. Keep building things. It's what you do best. And remember that every nail you hammer, every board you saw, every home you create is an act of love. You taught me that. You built me a foundation that nothing could shake, not even death. Thank you for everything. I love you always. You're Emily. I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf next to a photo of Margaret and Emily. 3 generations of love in one house. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the pine table. Outside, fireflies began to dance in the garden. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, the sounds of a home that had weathered storms and survived. I was home. Really, truly home, and I finally understood the deepest truth of all. We don't own the things we love. We're simply their caretakers for a while. And the greatest gift we can give is to care for them with dignity, protect them with courage, and pass them on with grace. Derek had wanted to possess. I had learned to cherish. That made all the difference. I'm 67 years old now. I've lost my wife, my daughter, and nearly lost my home. But I'm still here. Still standing. Still building. Because that's what we do when life tries to tear us down. We pick up our tools, we call on our friends, and we rebuild. Not just houses, but hope. Not just structures, but strength. And we remember that the truest measure of a person isn't what they own, but what they give, what they protect, what they leave behind. Emily and Margaret left me love. Derek left me nothing but a reminder that character matters more than anything. I'll spend the rest of my days making sure this house, this home, stands as a testament to the people who filled it with light. That's my promise. That's my purpose. That's my peace. The young couple I agreed to build a home for? We broke ground on their property last week. I'm teaching them as we go, showing them how to hammer nails straight, how to choose good lumber, how to build something that will last. They remind me so much of Margaret and me when we were young, full of dreams and determination. Building their home has become more than just a job. It's a way of honoring everything Emily and Margaret taught me. That love is built one careful action at a time. That homes are more than walls and roofs. That what we create with our hands and hearts outlasts us. I still have hard days. Days when the grief hits me out of nowhere and I miss Margaret's laugh or Emily's smile so much I can barely breathe. But those days are becoming less frequent, replaced by moments of genuine peace and even joy. The house is full of life again in different ways. Patricia and her book club meet here twice a month. The community dinner group rotates locations, and when it's my turn to host, I cook Margaret's recipes and tell stories about the old days. Young Jason from the motel is learning carpentry from me, comes by on weekends to help with projects and absorb whatever wisdom I can share. Derek, I heard he ended up in Florida after all, working some low-level sales job, living in a rental apartment, no more BMW, no more expensive suits, no more grand schemes. Just the consequences of his choices catching up with him. I don't think about him much anymore. It's not worth the energy. Instead, I think about the lessons I've learned, about how justice doesn't always come quickly, but it does come, about how community and integrity matter more than individual gain, about how the relationships we nurture are the only things we truly keep. I think about Emily's words in her journal, about how real love is quiet and steady, about how home is where we build our foundations, about how every act of creation, every nail hammered with care, is an act of love. And I think about Margaret painting those shutters yellow, singing in the sunshine, creating beauty because that's what she did. She taught Emily, and Emily taught me in her own way, that life isn't about accumulating things. It's about creating moments worth remembering. So now I ask you, have you ever had to fight to protect something that truly mattered to you? Have you ever discovered that what you thought was lost was actually yours all along? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the importance of family, home, and integrity, please give it a like. Subscribe to hear more stories about real life, real struggles, and real triumphs. And share this with someone who might need to hear that justice does prevail, that standing up for what's right matters, and that home is always worth fighting for. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. May your own homes be filled with love, your foundations be strong, and your hearts be at peace. Take care of each other, protect what matters, and remember that the truest wealth is measured not in what we own, but in what we give and who we love.